Mr. Duguid.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I do appreciate you giving me the time that I've already tried to pare down to the 10 minutes that was suggested earlier. It's a pleasure to follow the Honourable Member for Nahili Nya. As he mentioned himself, the Right Honourable Member for Orkney and Shetland, myself, and the Honourable Member for Strangford, who unusually is not in this position, have this same consistent issue with access to not EU labour, so it's not a Brexit issue, but non-EEA labour that the fishing industry have become dependent on over the years. Anyway, I welcome this opportunity to speak on the Fisheries Bill, as well as a statement from the Secretary of State. The fisheries sector is hugely significant in my constituency of Banff and Buchan. Peterhead is the largest whitefish port in Europe. A little further up the coast is the port of Fraserburgh. These are the two largest towns in my constituency. A little further around the coast is a smaller but no less significant to its own local community port of Macduff. In terms of tonnage, almost half of the fish landed by UK registered boats is landed in my constituency. Not just the fishermen, but the wider communities around the coast of my constituency and around the UK coast have lost a great deal over the decades we've been in the Common Fisheries Policy. And this has not just been a loss of livelihood, the scrapping of boats and the closure of businesses, but fundamentally a loss of what identifies these coastal communities and the people who live there, who remember what once was. Quite rightly, the people in these communities look forward to making the most of the opportunity, the sea of opportunity, presented by leaving the EU and the CFP. All of us speaking in this debate and those watching in fishing communities around the UK are keenly aware that this Parliament will soon be reviewing the proposed EU withdrawal agreement, and its impact on fisheries is not insignificant. It will be difficult, therefore, to discuss this bill without referring to the withdrawal agreement, the outline political declaration or any new future fisheries agreement. I'm very much aware of the concerns raised by fishing interests in my constituency and beyond. I've been reviewing the text of the agreement myself, as well as taking on board input from members of the fishing community, industry representatives and trade bodies, among a host of various other stakeholders. My Scottish Conservative colleagues and I made our position clear to this government and look forward to working with ministers to find resolution to a range of concerns raised. There are a variety of concerns which can be summed up in two words: timings and leverage. On timings, we leave the EU in March 2019. When we leave the EU, we leave the Common Fisheries Policy. That is not a political decision, that is a matter of legality. We can't be in the CFP if we're not in the EU. Likewise, we cannot be in the EU, as would be the position of honourable members opposite, and not be in the CFP. The agreement states that we enter upon an implementation period, and at that point, the implementation period is stated in the agreement as ending on the 31st of December 2020, and as others have mentioned, clause 42 would be most welcome if the actual date, no later than December 22, was inserted at that point. Within the month of December 20, we must be in a position in which we have completed our first negotiations as an independent coastal state in time for beginning to realise the opportunities this presents for the calendar year 2021. On leverage, when we first enter upon these negotiations in December 2020, we must have the maximum possible leverage in those negotiations. As seen in recent media reports from the continent, EU fishing interests are far from pleased that in the text of the agreement there is no mention of retained, guaranteed automatic access to UK waters post-Brexit. To have the maximum possible leverage in annual coastal state negotiations from December 2020, we must resist the EU's demand for any continued automatic access to our waters. As confirmed by the Prime Minister in response to my question on the subject last week, we must not accept the EU's attempts to link future trade agreements with automatic access to UK waters. We get into the subject of the Fisheries Bill itself and the White Paper before it. It's been... yes, I'll give way to the Honourable Gentleman.
You understand that the trade agreement is equally important. It's clearly important to be able to get the products to market. So, in actual fact, all this about everything being in isolation, we've got to look at it in the mix anyway, because that helps the whole sector.
I thank the Honourable Gentleman for his comments, and I will get to that point a little later. The Fisheries Bill itself and the White Paper before it, as I said, has been welcomed by organisations across the industry, for example the Scottish Fishermen's Federation, and this is a vital piece of legislation that lays the groundwork for the revival of our fishing industry outside of the Common Fisheries Policy. It is important to note that in the event of no deal, the legislation enacted by this bill ensures that all UK vessels can legally continue to fish in our own waters. For example, Clause 7 of this bill revokes the CFP regulation that allows EU vessels unfettered access to our waters. Clause 8 introduces the common sense principle that any foreign vessel that wants to fish in our waters must do so on our terms. This has taken back control of our waters, and it is the basis of the revival of the British fisheries sector. Clause 9 covers the UK fishing boats required to be licensed, as well as stating those for which licensing will not apply. Going back to Clause 1 of the bill, which defines the fisheries objectives, as many other honourable members have said, chief among them is the sustainability objective, which ensures that fishing and aquaculture is environmentally sustainable in the long term and managed in a way consistent with contributing to the economy and to food supplies. I was going to go through other objectives, but because I'm pushed for time, I will skip those. Clauses 9 to 17, however, set out rules for the licensing of UK and foreign fishing boats. I just want to cover that briefly. While the devolved administrations are responsible for licensing boats in Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland, licences issued by any UK fisheries administration will be valid across UK waters. The UK Government will agree access arrangements internationally, and although each devolved administration are responsible for issuing licences to foreign vessels in their zones, it is encouraging to know that the UK Government will administer this, having already been provided this consent by the devolved administrations. Clauses 18 to 22 cover the allocation of fishing opportunities, and is an area I would like to seek some specific clarification from the Minister. Clause 18, on the power of the Secretary of State to determine fishing opportunities, I would appreciate if you could comment on the appropriateness of the Secretary of State to be setting quotas for lobster or brown crab in Scotland, which I believe is subject to international agreement. Clause 22, on the sale of English fishing opportunities, given that English registered vessels operate in Scottish POs and vice versa, could the Minister please provide clarification whether these would be available for all UK vessels? Finally, I'd like to say something about the future of fishing industry in my constituency and fishing communities around the UK. After decades of deterioration within the CFP, we are not going to see a full recovery overnight. Government support will be required, support which has previously been assured to this House by the Prime Minister and others, and I quote, to secure a sustainable and profitable fishing industry that will regenerate coastal communities and support future generations of UK fishermen. So, Madam Deputy Speaker, I would like to conclude by reassuring the Minister that after we leave the CFP, after we become an independent coastal state with all the powers and control that entails, I look forward to continuing to work with this Government to deliver that ambition to regenerate not just the fishing industry, but also the wider communities and economy towards which the Sea of Opportunity will deliver.